The sky above the desert of planet Serenine was burning orange. The sun here was not like Earth's sun. It was brighter, hotter, and unkind. Waves of heat moved across the golden sand, making everything shimmer. The wind blew slowly, carrying the sharp sound of silence across the empty land. High above the desert, a small spaceship flew in panic. It was damaged, and black smoke was coming from one side. The ship shook as it tried to stay in the air, but it was falling too fast. Inside the ship was a passenger from a faraway galaxy, an alien woman named Nira. Nira's skin was light silver, with soft crystal-like patterns. Her eyes were blue like deep water. She was from a peaceful planet where there were trees that glowed and rivers that sang. Her people, called the Lunari, traveled across space to learn, to share, and to understand other life. But today, Nira was alone. Her ship had been hit by a storm while passing near this dry planet. Alarms rang inside the ship. Control screen flashed red symbols. Nira tried her best to guide the ship, but she was weak. The crash was hard. The ship hit the sand, bounced once, and then rolled, breaking into parts. Metal pieces flew in the air and buried themselves deep into the dunes. After the crash, everything was quiet again. Hours passed. The hot wind blew sand over the broken ship. Sun kept rising, burning hotter and hotter inside the broken part of the ship. Nira lay still. Her body was hurt. Her leg was twisted, and her shoulder was bruised. The soft crystals on her skin had lost their glow. Her breathing was slow. She opened her eyes once, looked at the sky, and then closed them again. Thought she would die there. She had no strength left. Her people were far, and her signal device was broken. The heat was too much. She had water, but not enough, and there was no shelter. The desert was endless, but far away, something moved. On the other side of the dunes, an old rover was driving slowly. It was a small vehicle, half covered in sand, but still strong. The driver was a human named Tommel. He had come to Serenane as a desert explorer. He lived in a small research outpost made of solar panels and metal sheets. His job was to study sand patterns, desert insects, and find signs of water under the ground. That morning, Tommel saw something unusual in the sky. A line of smoke, black and thin, drawing across the orange clouds. He picked up his old binoculars and looked. Then he saw a crash far in the distance. Could be a meteor, he whispered to himself. But then he thought, what if it isn't? Was the kind of person who couldn't ignore strange things. So he packed a water bottle, a solar charger, and a medical kit. He started the rover and drove toward the smoke. The desert was dangerous, even during the day. The heat could make machines stop working. But curiosity was stronger than fear. After 2 hours, he saw the wreck. Pieces of the ship were spread across the sand. One part was still glowing slightly. Tommel got out of the rover carefully. He had never seen a ship like this before. It didn't look human. The metal was smooth, soft to touch, and the design was like flowing water. Is someone inside? He asked aloud, though no one answered. Then he heard a sound, a weak sound. It's like someone breathing. He ran toward the noise and pushed away a broken panel. Behind it, in the shadow of the wreck, he saw her. She didn't look like any human. She also didn't look scary. Her body was slim and elegant. Her skin was pale and glowing softly like moonlight. Her silver hair was stuck to her face, and her lips were dry. But she was alive. Tommel looked at her, surprised. He had read about alien life, but had never expected to see it with his own eyes. He could see she was in pain. It's okay, he said gently. I'm here to help. She opened her eyes weakly. Their eyes met as full of worry, hers full of fear and confusion. Slowly, he lifted her in his arms. She was light, almost weightless. He carried her carefully to the rover, placed her in the back seat, and gave her a small sip of water. Drank it slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. I don't know if you understand me, he said, but I'm not going to leave you here. He covered her with a thin blanket to protect her from the sun. Then he turned the rover around and began driving back toward his outpost. The sun was setting, and the desert sky was turning purple. The journey back would take time, but he didn't care. His mind was full of questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was she alone? But one thing he knew for sure, he couldn't let her die. The sun had started to fall behind the dunes. When Tomel reached his outpost, the building was small and simple, just a single metal room with solar panels on the roof and a short tower used for communication. Around it were a few machines for digging sand and measuring wind. It wasn't much, but it was home to him. He parked the rover under a shade and gently looked back at the alien woman. She was still breathing, but weak. Her silver skin looked dry. Her eyes were closed. Tomel quickly lifted her out of the rover and carried her inside the outpost. He placed her on a soft bed in the corner, under a low light. Then he turned on the cooler to fight the desert heat and brought water in a clean glass. Nira, he whispered. He didn't know her name yet, but the word had come to his mind. When he looked at her, it sounded soft, like her. He placed a few drops of water on her lips. She opened her eyes slowly. Her blue eyes moved around the room, confused but calm. You're safe now, he said softly. She didn't speak. But her eyes moved to his, and for a moment there was understanding between them. Tomel didn't sleep that night. He sat beside her and checked her condition again and again. He cleaned the small wounds on her arm with warm water. Her skin was strange smooth but strong, and it healed quickly. He gave her another few sips of water every hour. In the early morning, Nira sat up for a short time. Her movement was slow, but her eyes were clear. She pointed to her wrist, where a broken band of metal hung like a bracelet. Tomel brought it closer. It looked like a small device. Is this important? He asked. She nodded once. Tomel carefully opened the device. It was damaged, but some parts were still working. He used his tools to clean it and connect it to a power source. After some time, the screen lit up slightly, and a faint symbol appeared glowing in soft blue. Nira smiled weakly. It was the first time he saw her smile. It was gentle and peaceful. This is your signal device, isn't it? He asked. She touched her heart with one hand, then pointed to the sky. He understood. She wanted to send a message to her people. I'll help you, he promised. Over the next few days, Tomel worked hard. He fixed parts of the signal device using wires and power cells from his own machines. During this time, Nira slowly recovered. She could sit now and take small steps. Though she still didn't speak, she started using signs and drawings to communicate. One morning, she took a piece of old paper and drew a picture. It showed a planet with shining rings and a tree with light. It looked beautiful and calm. Your home? Tomel asked. She smiled and nodded. Then she drew a second picture, her spaceship flying, then crashing, and then herself lying in the desert. She looked at Tomel with sad eyes. I found you just in time, said. Then she drew one more shape, a small figure helping a taller one. It was him helping her. Tomel laughed softly. I like this drawing. Nira began to help him too. She was good at using energy. When a part of the solar panel broke, she placed her hand on it and it began to work again. Tomel was amazed. You use light like magic, he said. She placed her hand on his and shook her head gently, then pointed to her heart. It was not magic. It was a part of her nature. Every day they shared simple things. Tomel showed her how to drink cactus water and how to use desert goggles. Nira showed him how to sense wind changes and how to grow small energy seeds in the sand. One afternoon, they sat outside watching the sky. Nira pointed to the stars and drew shapes in the sand with her finger. Tomel guessed their meanings. Is that your sun? He asked. She nodded. And this is your moon. She smiled and nodded again. Then she drew a symbol, a circle with a line going up to a second star. She pointed to him, then to herself. Us? He asked. She touched the drawing gently, as if saying yes. Later that night, the signal device finally worked. A soft sound came from it, and a small light rose into the sky. Nira stood up, her silver hair glowing under the moonlight. She looked calm, and her eyes had hope. Tomel stood beside her. Will they find you now? She looked at him, then to the stars. Her expression was gentle but unsure. "We'll wait," he said. "You're not alone anymore." Nira nodded slowly. She placed her hand over his heart, then over her own, and smiled. Though they were from different worlds, they had built something special: trust, kindness, and quiet friendship. In the middle of the scorching desert, something unexpected had grown, and it had just begun. The desert sun rose slowly, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink. Inside the small outpost, Nira opened her eyes. The cool air from the small fan brushed against her face. She felt better. Her body still ached, but the burning pain was gone. Her silver skin had regained a soft glow, and the bruises were fading across. The room, Tomel was sitting near a table, working with wires and tools. He turned his head and smiled as he saw her awake. "Morning," he said kindly. "You look better today." Nira sat up slowly and gave a small nod. Though she didn't speak his language, she understood his voice. It was warm and gentle, and it made her feel safe. Tomel brought her a cup of water and placed it on the table beside her bed. "Drink slowly," he said. "You need to stay strong." She lifted the cup carefully and sipped. It was cool and fresh. Her eyes met his, and she gave a small smile. It was her way of saying thank you. Tomel had never taken care of someone from another world before, but something about Nira felt familiar. She wasn't just an alien, she was kind, calm, and curious. Over the last few days, he had watched her grow stronger. He had seen her fix broken machines by touching them. He had seen her draw peaceful pictures in the sand. He had seen her smile, even when she was weak. He didn't know her full story. But he knew one thing: he didn't want her to suffer again. That day, Nira stood for the first time without help. She walked slowly to the window and looked outside. Endless sand stretched in every direction, but in her eyes, it was not just a desert. It was the place where she had been saved. She placed her hand on the window and closed her eyes. A quiet hum came from her, like a soft song without words. Tomel watched her with wonder. "What are you doing?" he asked gently. She turned around, smiled, and pointed to her chest. Then she pointed to the sand. "You feel connected to the land?" he guessed. She nodded. Tomel had seen many strange things on Scifi, but this was different. It was not science or machines, it was something deeper. Nira could feel life, even in the desert. After breakfast, they sat outside under the shade. The sun was high, but a soft wind made the heat easier to bear. Tomel brought out a few small items: a compass, a light scanner, and a sketchbook. He placed them on the ground and looked at Nira. "Let's teach each other." She looked curious. He pointed to the compass and moved it. "This shows direction." Turned it slowly, showing how it always pointed to the same spot. Nira watched carefully, then picked it up. She pointed it toward the sun, then toward the small hill in the distance. She was learning fast. Then she took out a small, glowing crystal. From her pocket, it was smooth and soft blue in color. She placed it in the center of her palm and held it out. Tomel leaned forward. "What does it do?" She closed her fingers, then opened them again. The crystal floated above her hand, spinning gently. Tomel's eyes widened. "That's amazing." Nira smiled and gave it to him. He caught it carefully. It was warm. He laughed. Softly. "I don't know how it works, but thank you." They spent the whole afternoon showing each other simple things. Tomel showed her how to read the desert sky, how clouds moved before a storm, and how shadows told the time. Nira taught him how to feel energy from living things, even tiny plants hiding under the sand. They didn't speak the same language, but they understood each other. Later that evening, as the sky turned orange, Nira drew something in the sand. She used her finger to sketch a tall tree with light hanging from its branches. Beside it, she drew a river that curved like a smile. Tomel pointed at the tree. "Your home?" She nodded and touched the drawing gently. Then she added two small figures, one with short hair like his, and one with long lines like hers. They were sitting together under the tree. Tomel smiled. "It's us." Nira looked at him, then looked away shyly. There was a long silence between them, but it was peaceful. The desert wind passed over them like a soft whisper at night. Tomel brought out a small lantern and placed it between them. He gave her a piece of sweet cactus fruit. She tasted it, and her eyes lit up. "You like it?" he asked. She nodded quickly and smiled, her silver hair glowing softly in the lantern light. Tomel looked up at the stars. "Your people will find you soon," he said quietly. Nira looked up too. The stars were bright and clear. She held up her hand and touched one of the stars in the sky with her finger, then slowly moved her finger to her heart. Tomel understood. "You miss them," she nodded, but then she pointed to him, and then to herself. "You're not alone," he said. She smiled, and touched his shoulder gently. A warm light passed through her fingers. It wasn't hot, it felt like a soft wave of calm. Tomel closed his eyes for a moment. "What was that?" Nira didn't answer, but she looked happy. That night, they sat quietly under the stars. No words, no questions. Just silence and friendship, in the middle of a desert on a strange planet. Something special had started to grow, not just healing of the body, but healing of the heart. Nira had come from the stars. Tomel had come from Earth. But here on the sands of Scifi, they had found each other, and something told them this was only the beginning. The next morning on Scifi began like any other. The sky was light blue, and the soft desert wind moved the top layers of sand. The sun was rising slowly, casting golden light across the small outpost. Inside the shelter, Tomel was checking his weather scanner. He looked closely at the screen. The lines were changing. The numbers were going up fast. He frowned. "Strange," he said to himself. "The wind pressure is climbing. That's not good." Just then, Nira walked in. She was holding a small plant that had grown from one of her glowing seeds. It was green with soft blue leaves. She smiled and placed it near the window where it could get sunlight. Tomel turned to her. "Something's coming, a storm." She looked at the scanner, tilted her head, and then touched the screen gently. Her eyes became serious. She walked outside for a moment, stood still, and raised her hand to the wind. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. When she came back in, she used her finger to draw on the sand-covered floor, a large swirl, like a spinning cloud, and small marks that looked like crashing waves of dust. "A big storm," Tomel said, understanding. Nira nodded once. Her face was calm but focused. Tomel rushed to prepare the outpost. He locked the windows, checked the seals on the doors, and tied down the solar panels outside. He brought in extra water and packed food into a secure box. The shelter was built for desert weather, but a sandstorm on Scifi could be dangerous. Nira followed him, helping where she could. She moved quickly but with care. When Tomel struggled with a panel, she gently placed her hand on it, and it lit up slightly, sealing tighter. Her energy was useful in ways he didn't fully understand, but he trusted her. Inside, the air became still. The outside world grew quiet to quiet. Tomel looked at Nira. This may last for hours, maybe longer. Nira sat cross-legged on the floor and motioned for him to join her. They sat together in silence as the sky outside turned dark soon. The storm began. It started with a soft hum. Then came a loud whooshing sound as the wind picked up speed. Dust hit the walls like sharp rain. The sky outside was no longer blue, it was full of thick yellow sand swirling like a river in the air. The shelter shook slightly. Tomel stood up and checked the roof. "Still holding," he said. "Let's hope it stays that way." Nira looked calm, but she knew the danger. She took out a small crystal from her pouch and placed it in the center of the room. A soft dome of light spread across the walls and ceiling. It was not solid, but it shimmered like a bubble. Tomel watched in surprise. "What is this?" Nira pointed to the crystal and then to the roof. She drew a shape with her hand, one that meant protection. A shield. Nodded too. Mel smiled. "You just saved us extra trouble." The storm roared outside for hours. Sand piled against the windows. The air outside was wild, but inside the light dome, everything was still. As the wind howled, Tomel made tea from desert herbs and shared it with Nira. She held the warm cup in both hands and breathed in the scent. It reminded her of something from home. They sat on the floor with a light between them. To pass time, Nira took out her crystal pen and drew glowing shapes in the air. Lines floated like ribbons. She created a picture, a tall tower with soft clouds and flying birds around it. Tomo leaned closer. "Is this where you live?" She nodded and added a tiny figure standing on the tower, hair flowing, arms wide open. Tomo pointed to the figure. "You," Nira smiled. She added another figure standing next to the first shorter. Wearing something that looked like a desert coat, Tomo laughed softly. "That's me, isn't it?" Nira touched the drawing and made the two figures raise their arms, holding hands. As stars twinkled above, Tomo looked at her and said, "That would be nice." She lowered her eyes, a little shy, but her smile said she agreed. The storm went on into the night. Sometimes the walls of the outpost shook, but the light dome held strong. Crystal glowed steadily, and Nira watched it carefully. Her energy was keeping it alive. Tomo placed a blanket around her shoulders. "You've done so much already, you should rest." "Ah!" But Nira shook her head. She placed her palm on the floor and closed her eyes. The dome shimmered brighter for a few seconds, then settled. He sat down beside her. "You're more than just strong. You're brave." She looked at him, unsure of the word. He placed his hand on his chest. "Brave," he repeated. Then he pointed to her. She thought for a moment, then copied the motion. "Brave," she said softly. It was the first human word she had spoken. Tomo's eyes widened. "You said it." She smiled, proud. Then she pointed to him and said again, "Brave." Tomo laughed. "No one's ever called me that." They sat together, side by side, as the storm outside began to fade. By early morning, the wind had slowed. The golden light of dawn returned. The sky was dusty but calm. The sand had covered most of the outpost's walls and windows, but inside, everything was safe. The light dome faded as the crystal turned dim. Nira looked tired, but she was still smiling. Tamel stood up and opened a small roof hatch to let fresh air in. "We made it," he said. Nira stepped outside with him. The desert had changed. The dunes were taller now. The sky was quiet. It felt like a new world. They looked around together. The plant she had placed near the window had survived. Its leaves were brighter than before, shining in the morning sun. She touched the plant gently and whispered a few soft sounds. It responded by opening a tiny flower. Tamel watched, amazed. "You speak to nature," he said. She looked at him and said, slowly, "Listen." "Heart?" Tamel nodded. "Yes, with the heart." In the middle of a wild planet, in a small outpost lost in the sand, a human and an alien had faced the storm together, not just of nature, but of fear, silence, and difference. Now they stood, stronger, side by side, under a new sky. And they both knew this bond was something no storm could break. The days after the storm were calm and clear. The desert was peaceful again. The sun shone warmly over the small outpost where Tamel and Nira lived. The bond between them had grown stronger, like roots of a tree reaching deep into the earth. Each morning, Tamel would bring fresh water and food for Nira. She had almost fully recovered. Her silver skin shone softly in the sunlight. Her blue eyes sparkled with curiosity. One morning, Tamel sat outside watching the desert wind move the golden sand. Nira came out, carrying a small glowing seed in her hand. She placed it carefully in the sand and covered it gently. "Plant?" Tamel asked, leaning closer. She nodded and smiled. As they waited, the seed began to grow slowly. Tiny green leaves peeked out, glowing faintly blue. The plant grew taller every hour, surprising Tamel. "This is your magic," he said, amazed. Nira laughed softly. Tamel wanted to teach Nira about Earth and about humans. He brought a small tablet from his bag and showed her pictures. She touched the screen, curious and gentle. He showed her deserts on Earth, vast and dry, like Scifi, but also filled with strange plants and animals. He showed her humans helping each other, working together, and exploring new places. Nira watched. with wide eyes. She pointed to a picture of a group of humans standing together. "Friend?" she said. "Yes," Tomel agreed. "Friend." Then Nira wanted to teach Tomel about her world. She took out a small glowing orb from her bag. When she touched it, pictures appeared, shining forests, rivers of light, and tall towers made of crystal. Tomel reached out and touched the images. It felt warm and alive. "This is where you come from?" he asked. She nodded. Nira smiled and pointed to the sky in the pictures. "Sun," she said. Then she pointed to a glowing moon. "Moon." Tomel smiled. "Both have suns and moons, just different." Days passed with more sharing. Tomel showed Nira how to read the stars for direction. He explained the patterns of constellations and how humans use them to find their way. Nira listened carefully and then drew in the sand with a stick. She made shapes like stars and lines connecting them. She looked at Tomel and smiled. "You want to teach me your stars?" he asked. She nodded. Tomel took a small notebook and wrote down the names of stars. Together, they learned from each other. One evening, they sat under the desert sky, filled with thousands of shining stars. Nira pointed up and whispered the names of her constellations. Tomel shared stories of human legends connected to the stars. Food was another way they connected. Tomel brought out a small piece of sweet cactus fruit. Nira tasted it, and her eyes lit up. "Sweet," she said. She offered him a glowing fruit from her bag. It smelled fresh and strange, like honey and flowers. Tomel took a bite. The flavor was new and wonderful. They laughed together, sharing the simple joy of trying new things. One afternoon, Tomel noticed Nira watching him work on his rover. The engine had stopped and he was trying to fix it. She stepped closer and touched the engine. A soft blue light came from her hand. The engine hummed to life. Tomel looked at her amazed. "You have a gift." She smiled and said softly, "Help." Their days were filled with simple joys and new lessons. They learned that even though they were from different worlds, they shared many feelings: hope, kindness, and friendship. Nira showed Tomel how to feel the energy in the desert, the warmth of the sand, the softness of the wind, and the quiet life in the rocks. Tomel showed her how to use simple machines and tools, how to listen to the earth, and how to be patient with the slow changes of the desert. Together, they built a small garden of glowing plants, using Nira's seeds and Tomel's care. One evening, Nira sat quietly and drew in the sand. She made two small figures, one tall and one short, holding hands under a shining sun. Tomel smiled. "That's us." She nodded and then drew a circle around the figures, with lines connecting them to stars. "Circle," Tomel said. "Friend," Nira added. Their friendship had grown into something beautiful, a connection between two different worlds. The desert night was quiet, but inside the outpost, hope was alive. Two beings from different stars and different places had found each other in a world of sand and sun, and together they were ready for whatever came next. The morning sky over Scifi was calm, and the wind was light, and the heat had not yet risen. Inside the small outpost, Nira sat beside the table, holding her broken signal device. She looked at it with hope in her eyes. The crystal inside had started glowing again. It was weak, but it was something. Tomel entered the room with a cup of warm tea. "Good morning," he said. Nira smiled and nodded. She showed him the signal device. Tomel leaned closer. "Is it ready?" She pointed to the crystal, and then to the sky. Her eyes sparkled. Tomel understood. "You want to try sending the signal?" Again, Nira nodded. Tomel helped her take the device outside. They placed it on a flat rock where the sunlight was strongest. Nira touched the small crystal, and it began to glow brighter. She closed her eyes and held her hands near it. A soft hum filled the air. A beam of light shot upward into the sky. It wasn't loud. It wasn't bright like fire. It was soft and steady, like a quiet song calling into the stars. Tomel stood beside her, watching. "They'll see it," he said. Nira opened her eyes and looked up. She pressed her hand to her heart and whispered something in her own language. Then she turned to Tomel and smiled. After sending the signal, they waited. The day passed slowly. Tomel tried to keep busy by checking equipment, fixing tools, and organizing supplies. Nira helped in the garden they had built. Glowing plants were growing well, bringing color and light to the dusty land. But both of them were thinking the same thing. Will someone answer the signal? That night, they sat together under the stars, watching the sky. Nira pointed at a group of stars in the distance and drew a shape in the air her home. She looked at Tomel, with hope, but also something more, uncertainty. Tomel said softly, I hope they find you soon. She nodded slowly. Her smile was soft, but her eyes looked far away. The next day, something strange happened. While Nira was resting inside, Tomel noticed a low vibration in the sand. He knelt down and placed his hand on the ground. Felt like a soft thumping. Repeating slowly, he stood up and looked across the desert. Something was moving in the distance, a shadow under the sand. He walked back toward the outpost and called, Nira. She came outside quickly. When she looked at the sand, her eyes became sharp and alert. She raised her hand and moved her fingers in the air. Blue light formed between them. She saw the shape under the sand and drew a line in the air to show. It too Tomel, it was big. The creature under the sand was drawn by the energy signal. It moved closer, curious and quiet. Though they couldn't see it completely, the movement under the sand was slow and smooth, like a giant swimming through the desert. Tomel stepped back. Can't fight it, he said quietly. Nira looked at him and nodded. Then she closed her eyes and placed both hands on the ground. A soft glow spread around them. The sand near their shelter became still. It was a protective circle and energy field. The creature stopped moving forward. It moved slowly around the field as if searching. Nira took out a second small crystal, held it up, and let it float. The crystal shone brightly, catching the creature's attention. She stepped away from the shelter and walked a few steps into the open. Tomel's heart beat fast. Be careful. Nira turned and gave him a soft smile, then focused on the floating crystal. She moved her hand slowly, and the crystal began to float higher. The creature followed the light. Then, without sound, the creature turned away and slowly disappeared beneath the sand. Tomel ran to Nira. Are you all right? She nodded, breathing slowly. Her face was calm, but a little tired. She sat down on a rock to rest. Tomel sat beside her. You protected us again. Nira looked at the sky and pointed to the stars. Soon she whispered. He nodded. Come, you're not alone. That night, the sky was clearer than ever. The stars looked closer, brighter. Nira sat outside, her eyes watching every movement in the sky. Tomel sat beside her. You miss them, don't you? She nodded. Then she pointed to the stars and drew two small shapes, a star and a sun slowly moving toward each other. You mean, you're coming? She nodded again. Tomel smiled. That's good. But deep inside, something felt different. He knew. She belonged among the stars. She had a home, a people, a life far beyond this desert. And soon, she would return to it. Before sunrise, Nira took out a flat crystal panel and touched it. A soft image appeared her planet. Towers of glowing crystal, trees with silver leaves and soft rivers of light. She showed it to Tomel. He looked at the image, amazed. It's beautiful. She then touched the image and made it smaller. Added a new image beside it, a small desert shelter under two moons. Tomel looked confused. What is that? She pointed to him, then to the shelter. You mean my home? She nodded and made a line connecting the two images. Tomel smiled slowly. You're saying our worlds can meet? Nira gently placed her hand on his. Together, she said softly. As the morning light touched the sand, they saw something. Moving in the sky, a small silver ship was slowly coming down through the clouds. It was smooth and bright, and it didn't make a sound. It hovered in the air above the dunes, and a soft light shined from its base. Nira stood up, her eyes filled with light and emotion. She stepped forward, holding the signal device. The ship responded with a beam of soft blue light, wrapping gently around her. It was a greeting, a call. Her people had found her. She turned to Tomel, eyes full of emotion, joy, sadness, gratitude, and something more. Tomel stepped closer. They came. Nira nodded slowly. She reached into her small pouch and took out a crystal. She placed it in. His hand, it shone with soft color and felt warm. Memory, she said softly. Tomel held it tightly. Thank you. Nira looked into his eyes. Then, without words, she pressed her hand to his chest and then to her own. Then she stepped into the beam of light. The ship gently pulled her upward. Slowly she rose into the sky, the light surrounding her like a cocoon of peace. Tomel watched in silence. The ship turned once in the air and then flew upward into the stars. He stood there, alone, holding the glowing crystal, and he smiled. The silver ship had disappeared into the sky, leaving behind only a soft trail of light that slowly faded. The desert returned to silence. The wind moved gently across the dunes, and the morning sun rose behind the hills. Tomel stood alone outside his small outpost. He was holding the glowing crystal that Nira had given him. It was smooth and warm, and its soft blue light pulsed slowly like a gentle heartbeat. He looked up at the sky. The stars were no longer visible, but he knew they were still there. Somewhere, far beyond what his eyes could see, Nira was traveling home. He whispered, "Safe journey, my friend." The next days felt different. The outpost was quiet. Tomel went back to his usual tasks, checking weather equipment, collecting sand samples, and writing notes on desert life. But everything now reminded him of Nira. The small, glowing garden they had planted still grew beside the outpost. Even though the desert was dry and hot, the plants glowed softly at night, just like Nira's crystal. He watered them carefully, as if they were part of her. He often sat beside the garden in the evening, watching the sun go down. He held the crystal in his hand and remembered her. Soft smile, her gentle voice, her way of touching the ground and listening to the earth. Though she was gone, it didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like a promise. One evening, something unusual happened. Tomel was sitting outside with the crystal, looking at the stars. The sky was full of them, twinkling, bright, peaceful. Suddenly, the crystal in his hand began to glow brighter. Then, it floated into the air and formed a soft blue ring of light. In the center of that ring, a small moving image appeared. It was Nira. She stood in a bright place filled with crystal towers and glowing trees. Behind her, others of her kind walked peacefully. She smiled at him through the image. Her eyes were full of light. Tomel sat up, surprised but joyful. "Nira," she spoke softly. The words were not in his language, but the crystal translated them into gentle tones. "Friend Tomel," she said, "I reached home. You are remembered." Tomel smiled. "I'm glad you're safe." The image changed. It showed a tower in the center of Nira's city. Around it were small lights floating in the air. Then she said, "A garden now grows here from the seeds we shared. The air sings again. Life returns." Tomel watched in wonder. He had never seen anything so peaceful. Nira placed her hand on her chest in the image, then toward him. "Even far away," she said. "Hearts can still hear each other." Then the light faded, and the crystal returned to his hand. He sat quietly, tears gently forming in his eyes, not of sadness, but of joy. Weeks passed. Tomel's life slowly became steady again. He continued his research, sent reports to the Earth Station, and explored deeper parts of the desert. One day, he found a spot far beyond his usual path, a hidden cave, where cool air flowed from underground. Inside, the walls glowed slightly. He took out Nira's crystal. As it shone, a few of her seeds from his pouch began to glow too. He planted them there. Within days, small glowing plants grew. He named the cave Nira's Rest. It became a place of peace, a secret garden in the heart of the desert. Whenever he felt alone, Tomel visited the cave. There he felt close to her. Months turned into a full season. The desert changed color slightly as cooler winds came. The glowing plants around the outpost had spread wider. The crystal still glowed beside his bed every night. Then, one clear night, something new appeared in the sky. A small star blinked, where there hadn't been one before. It blinked 3 times, slowly, bright, dim, bright. Then it stopped. Tomo watched, recognizing the signal. It was the same rhythm Nira had used to say, "I'm here." He smiled. Even though she was far, they were still connected. Tamel took out a small book and wrote inside. Some say aliens are only stories. Some say they are threats. But I met one who was more human than most humans I've ever known. She taught me how to listen, not just with ears, but with the heart. He closed the book and placed it beside the crystal. That night, as he lay under the stars, he whispered, "Thank you, Nira." A soft wind passed by, as if answering him. Far away, across light years of space, Nira stood on a high platform on her home planet. She looked up at her own night sky. Around her, glowing trees swayed in the breeze. She held her own crystal in her hand, and in its light, Tomel's face appeared. She smiled. She knew the desert had changed both their lives forever, and under different skies on 2 distant worlds. They both looked up at the stars knowing they were not truly apart, because true friendship, once born, lives forever. The end.